All right, welcome. So today on the fourth session, we're going to talk about conditions. So last time when we mentioned about simple variables, there were three. There was number, there was string, there was one I didn't quite get into, so it's boolings. Boolean is a very simple value. It can either be true or it can be false. It basically is a value to indicate a true or false, true or false value. And all of these are examples of Boolean. So even though they are an expression, the result of these is a Boolean. So for example, 3 bigger than 2, of course, because 3 is larger than 2. If we store this as a result in Boolean, it will give us true. So in Node.js, when you compare things, you want to use 3 equal signs. I know it's kind of confusing, and there are certain applications of 2 equal signs, but in our case, most of the time when we compare things, use triple equal signs, and that means if it's absolutely the same. So down here we have some more examples. For 2 and 1, when we compare the value of these two numbers because they are not the same, this will return a false. And we can also compare strings similarly. If the strings are exactly identical, we'll get true. And this one, when you have a exclamation mark in front of the equal, so instead of 3 equals, it's exclamation equals equals. That means it returns true if the two things are not equal. So whenever you see exclamation mark when it deals with Boolean, it means not. So this expression basically says, okay, it's the left string not equal to the right string. So in this case, because they are the same string, it will return false because they are not equal, if that makes sense. And the last one, this is kind of a tricky one because you're comparing a string to a number, and because they are different, you will get a false. Okay. Cool. So, so in order to when we deal with booleans, there are certain ways we can manipulate them. Just how you can add numbers to other numbers to get numbers, or add two strings together to get a longer string that combines them. You can manipulate boolean as well. So the first one is very simple. You just flip the value. If it's true, it becomes false. If it's false, it becomes true. So in our case, let's say we have a variable called a boolean variable called is true. If we assign the opposite of that to this variable, it'll become false. And then we can test that out here. And you can console log just like you can console log any other variables. Cool. And now, no, sorry, I need to console log this one, wrong one. And now it shows up as false because we have true, and then with this we flip the value, so now it's false. Okay. And then when you have two Boolean values, you can get a result that only returns true if both of those Boolean values are true. So this is an AND operation. It only returns true if both of the Booleans are valid. So true var bool b equals true. So if we try to do this, and we try to log the result. So this one, because both of these are true, the result is going to be true. If either of them is false, then the result is going to be false. And you can tell the same happens and of course if neither of them are true, we get the same result as well. So if neither of them are true, of course, the AND operation will fail. Okay. So, and then you indicate AND with these ampersand. You just have to do it twice because this means something else. Make sure you're using 2 ampersands if you're dealing with booleans and you're trying to see see if the result is both true. Or on the other hand, will be true if either of them is true, and you indicate that with these vertical bars. I don't actually know what they're called. So, if one of them is true, it will return true. Same happens if the other way around. So if A is true and B is false, we still get a true. If both of them are true, of course, we still get a true. It only returns false if both of them are false. Okay, so these are the main ways how you will operate and deal with Boolean calculations when you have 2 or more Boolean values. And of course, you can do A and B and C if you want all of them to be true. You can also use parentheses to indicate the order of operation. So it's all very it should be pretty intuitive, but that's pretty much it for Boolean. So now, how do we use Boolean? This is where if statements come into play. So when we have an if statements, it only the the code within these two curly brackets only happens if the condition is met, which means the condition is a boolean that is a true boolean, and then it will execute a code. So here's an example. Let's say var myBool equals true if myBool console.log hello 1 hello 2. That shouldn't be here. Okay. So now because our boolean is true, the code will execute on line 4 because the myBool is true. If I change this to a false, however, when we run that, you will see that I skipped over this line. So anything that's between these two curly brackets will be ignored if this condition is not met. So that is a if statement. Now, lots of times we want to do something depending on the condition. So we can do what's called an if-else statement. If-else statement kind of looks like this, when you have is and you have else here. And what will happen is what's under if will only run if the condition is true. What's under else will only run if the condition is not true. Okay, so let's test that. So now we have hello A and hello B. And if our boolean is true, it's going to run this, but not this. And as you can see, we see hello A and hello 2, which is down here, but it does not run this one because the else condition was not met. If our boolean becomes false, however, it will run what's in the else blocks because this part didn't get triggered, and because we have an else clause following the if statement, it will run this instead. And then once done running, it kind of resumes how it normally runs from top to bottom. Okay, so this is kind of the flow of logic. Okay, so on top of if else, there's something called an else if. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So let's have another boolean. So this is when you have multiple conditions and you want it to go down the line and then run if certain things happen. So in our case, in this example, if we have condition 1 and condition 2, this the block between for if will only run if the condition 1 is true. If condition 1 is not true, however, it kind of goes down to the next thing in line. It's like, okay, otherwise, if condition 2 is true, then it will run the thing for condition 2. And then if condition 2 is also not true, then it will run what's in the else block. So these three things are sort of independent of each other. Like there's no case where more than one of these cases will run, and because of the way it's designed. So we can have an example here. So if myBool A A is true, else if myBool B, say B is true, else neither A nor B are true, and then you can say done. Cool. So now if A is true, then of course when we hit the first if statement, it will run this, A is true, and then it won't do anything down here. And one of these triggers, it just kind of skips over all of the else if and else, and it goes straight out of the if clause. Okay, and it will only, and because we have this in else if, this will only trigger if A is not true. So if A is false and B is true, we'll see this happening because this condition has been met. And I will say, hey, look at that, B is true. Cool. So, and the else statements will only trigger if all of the above if and else ifs all fail, and that's when we drop all the way down to else. So here we have neither A nor B are true. Great. Cool. So that is the basics on if, else if, and else. And because else if is sort of like a thing that goes in between else and else, if and else, you can add actually as many else ifs as you want in between these, and it will go through every single one of them from top to bottom until either one condition matches or if else the else condition matches. And remember, in the beginning we had an if statements without an else. The else part is also optional. You don't actually have to have this. If there's no else statements, it just kind of does nothing if none of the conditions are met. Okay, cool. So here's an example of using function with if statements. So this is to kind of give you more of like a quote-unquote real-life example. Let's say we have a function that greets the player when they logs into the game, and then we know if the player is a new player. So, and depending on that, we'll change up how we greet them. So here's an example. We have if the player is a new player, so we assume this is a boolean that that whatever is outside this function is passing in. If it's a new player, then we say, okay, welcome, and then we return. Remember, the return statement will terminate your function immediately. Once you return something, the function will kind of just drop out and then resume execution outside of the function. Down here, we have the else, so this will only get run if the player is not a new player. So let's see if we replicate this. Okay, and then we do outside, we run greet player, say it's true. If it is a new player, then we run this, and it says welcome. Yeah, and if it's not a true player, not a new player, it will say welcome back without missing exclamation mark. There you go. So here's an example of using if statement within a function. Okay, and now your homework. This one is a little bit a longer one, so I'll take some time to examine it. So create a function called should update high score with the following signature. So let's just go ahead and copy this, put it into our little code block here. Okay. So what this function should do is that it returns a boolean, and the boolean indicates if you should update the high score. So the couple parameters that will be passed into this function, first one is obviously the old high score before this. Like imagine the player has just finished a game and they got a new score, and we need to compare to see like, is this a score better than before? So we have the old high score, we have the new score, and conveniently we have a boolean that indicates if the player is a cheater. Of course, if the player is a cheater, no matter what new score they get, we are not going to assign the high score to a cheater. So this is what your function should do. If the player is a cheater, do not return false, because you don't want to update the high score, and you also want to print out cheater. So we pointed them out, so we know they're a cheater. If the player is not a cheater, however, this is where you compare their new score and the old high score. If the new score is better than the old high score, you need to say like, okay, congratulations, got a new score, and you also need to return true for the function. If it's not higher than the high score, or if it's a tie, in which case you didn't really break the record, in which case you just say better luck next time, and you return false. There you go. That's it for this session. I'll see you guys next time.